Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Innovator Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Williams, and in this week's episode, I was joined by Melissa Curran. Mimi, as some know her, is the founder of Novari Consulting, where she's been recently working with Murdoch Children's, MatterWorks, and Education Perfect on improving education and well-being outcomes for students and teachers across Australia. She's also currently working with the City of Liverpool in the City Futures team on shaping the future of one of the New South Wales government's key growth centres. And if that wasn't enough, she also happens to be a non-executive director for the Animal Welfare League, which I just love. Mimi is an accomplished executive leader with a proven history of driving innovation, commercial growth, and business transformation. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with this week's Ops Innovator, Mimi Curran. Hi, Mimi. Welcome to the Ops Innovator Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Scott. I'm stoked to be here. It's good to chat.
So we're going to talk about commercialization and growth, right? And what it might look like to peer through that lens in an innovative way, or maybe think creatively about what people and organizations and communities and companies might do when trying to address taking their business to the next level.
Mm.
Right? We've worked together in the past, right? But I don't know if we've ever had this kind of conversation before together. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your advice and your insights. It's going to be really good.
Same. And I feel like now, Scott, is such a good time to have this conversation, right? I think a lot of businesses are really grappling with this area and a changing economy. So yeah, I'm excited to get stuck into this topic.
So look, I love this story because you started out, as I understand, as a front-end web developer, right? And now, you've gone on to build this amazing career that spans marketing and product and consulting and executive leadership. Can you share with us how you got started and what that journey was like for you to go from, that early place to where you are now? And maybe along the way, sort of what are some key things that you might share with others who would want to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think where I started out, or where I intended to start out as a graduate, wasn't necessarily where I got to start out in my career. And I'm sure a lot of people face that, particularly now. So my career, as you can hear from my accent, I'm originally from the US, from the West Coast, Los Angeles. Bit of a twang because I've been in Australia a couple of decades, but yeah, my career began in the US. I came out of university wanting to get into advertising. So kind of studying communications and visual arts. But I couldn't get a job in the industry, right? The industry was full of people who'd been around 20, 30, 40 years, were established, and I didn't have any experience. So I began internet companies at that time. This is kind of the early days of the internet. And internet companies, web development companies were hiring people who needed jobs, at the kind of entry level. They were willing to train. They didn't care if you had experience. You just basically needed to have 2 eyes and a brain on your head. Right. And so I was hired by a internet company, and I was designing and developing customer experiences on digital platforms, right, and enabled by emerging technology. And this is in the days where Java, which is an established kind of lesser used now technology programming language. But in those days, it wasn't even an established programming language. And these organizations were developing software and web experiences using it. So I was trained how to build front-end experiences, bit of a creative. So I brought the visual element to it. And so that was really about bringing to life powerful customer and client experiences. And I will say that through my career, that's been a common narrative. So I've never really strayed from that passion and that purpose, but how it took shape in my career in terms of different roles evolved over time.
Okay.
So, I couldn't get a job in advertising. And as I said, I took the jobs that I could get and, crafted my own journey.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the focus around customer experience, right? I don't know if anybody else, but in the back of my mind, whenever I hear the words commercialization and growth, I just think sales. And then you think sales and customer experience. How do you practically bake customer experience into something like that?
Well, I think you've touched on such a important point and something I'm incredibly passionate about. Even though I've been in roles where would have maybe been termed as a salesperson, I've never seen myself that way because
Okay.
I never approached commercialization from a I've got to make money mindset, and I wouldn't encourage any organization to do that. Revenue is an outcome of a value exchange between the organization and your customer. And so
Right.
if you, as a business, whatever you are selling, whether it's a service or a product, there is an exchange. There's an expectation from the customer. There's a promise that is as an organization that you offer, and there's a value to that. And that value has to be in line with what your customer values it at, right? Otherwise,
Right.
they're not going to pay for that. So the ability to commercialize a product or service is very much centered around what are you offering? Is that in line with the customer expectation? Is it in line with what they want to pay for? Is it valuable enough to them? Is it, a burning thing that they need? And this is what a lot of organizations get wrong. Just looking at startups, for example, I mean, we all know the stats globally, it could be, depending on where you're looking in the world, 50 to 85% of startups fail, 85% of startups in Australia fail. And often why they fail is because they don't achieve product market fit. What's product market fit? Product market fit is there a demand for the solution that you've created? And does the solution that you've created meet the customer's expectations in the way they want that problem solved? Right? And it seems so simple, but to be candid, I mean, gosh, how many organizations over my career that I've seen that are trying to grow, or they're trying to commercialize their new product, or they're trying to grow their revenue. And this, what we're talking about, sits at the heart of the problem, right?
Right.
And I was just going to add to that it's not a one-time problem. So, take an established organization, Coca-Cola. It's not a problem that goes away eventually for your organization. It's a problem that sits at the heart of your business for as long as your business exists. Your product has to carry, or your service has to carry currency with your target customer. If everyone decides that they don't want to drink caramelized water, then Coke is out of business, right? So
yeah, that's right.
Right. And so, as I said, this conundrum is at the heart of commercialization and growth of commercialization.
And is there a sense of trying to grow too fast?
In a word, yes. And there's two levers, right? So there's always in every organization, and a lot of organizations I think don't necessarily know this, but I've worked for a lot of organizations that have been built from the ground up, right? And there is a natural tension between demand and fulfillment, right? So there's always going to be a natural tension between, think of a traditional business, the sales team, and the delivery or the operational team, right?
You got that right.
Right? and let's unpack that. Why is that? Because the revenue has to stay ahead of the delivery, right? Because if you're, well, that's how you grow. That's how you grow,
and why are you selling stuff that's so hard to do, right? Yeah, you don't have time.
Well, I mean, selling, then we get into the question of a company's ability to fulfill, but saying that an organization has really finally engineered their ability to deliver on what they sell. And let's assume they've done a great job at aligning those, that the way they deliver what they sell is right, that they're delivering the right things or selling the right things. So let's assume all that's right. If it is, there is inevitably going to be an ongoing tension, meaning that your sales and your operations or delivery are never going to be 100% equal, right? And if you look at the market now, we can see organizations that have been around 20 years, they're still not getting that balance right? they've made a ton of money during COVID. So they ramped up all their people and now it's gone down. So they're getting rid of them all. So yeah, it's a big challenge. And there's many organizations that still don't get it right. So point one, I would say to your question is, if you are any business, particularly a scaling business, you are going to have a ongoing tension between your revenue engine, your salespeople, and your delivery function, whatever you call that.
Is it a matter of just recognizing that is a fact?
I think it's part of that yes and part of that no. So part of that, the yes part is, yes, I think you have to recognize and accept as an organization that there is going to be that tension, but staying on top of your customer need and the demand and how that's going to impact revenue and sales is important. And again, if we go back to what we're seeing post-COVID, these are organizations that, in my view, I mean, how would they not have known, looking at, okay, everyone's sitting at home, everyone's ordering tons of stuff, let's say from Amazon, right?
Right.
That's not going to continue when people's lifestyle changes, right?
Sure.
So again, I sort of link that directly back to a fundamental misunderstanding of what are the behaviors that are impacting their customer and how their customer engages with their business, and how might that change in the future. And therefore, how do they need to realign their sales teams and their delivery teams to accommodate for that? Because no business, no economy, right? And there's some economies in the world that are facing some, lack of growth. Yeah. No economy, no business, and organization can grow upwards forever.
Right.
And so paying attention to these signals that are going to tell you, how are we in line with the customer expectation? Is a customer going to need our product or service? If they're buying more of our product or service, why would that be? How that might change in the future? And staying on top of that, and then realigning your organizational resources, your salespeople and your delivery people in line with that.
So as companies are starting to do that, I was wondering if you've seen in your work what some of the biggest challenges operationally that companies are seeing, or maybe sometimes even be self-imposed things that they've done that are standing in their way. Are there problems that you're seeing that need to be addressed?
Yeah, and I see this over and over, and I think at a really basic level, it's organizations that just get too caught up in BAU, and they're just. And again, it's I see it with small organizations, I see it with large organizations. They just get caught up in BAU. Oh, this is what we're doing, and we're just going to keep running this same operational approach day to day, and they don't stay on top of how the customer, again, their needs and expectations and options might be changing, and they don't stay on top of more efficient ways to do things. And this is particularly important for small businesses, right? They need to continually challenge how they're doing, continually find better ways to do things. And therefore, you have to keep a finger beyond BAU to go, okay, what's next? Right? What's next? Right. And that's how you can often miss opportunities, particularly commercial ones. If you're too knee deep in the business as usual stuff, you can miss those opportunistic moments.
What education or training or exposure can companies give to their entire business, right? All the people in their business, everybody hiding under the tables and in the corners and behind the scenes, right? Pulling the strings so that other people can go make the magic happen.
Yes.
Is this just something you learn and you have to be exposed to, or is there something companies can do to help accelerate that understanding for people and how they can play?
I think there's absolutely things that organizations can do to help people see the role they can play, particularly helping So oftentimes, different team members don't know how their role connects to other parts of the business, right?
Yeah.
And particularly when you think about organizations that have organized their people in role-based teams, which I personally think is a huge mistake, because you create those silos around team, and that's kind of the old way of organizing teams, right?
Yeah.
Here's all the X people, and here's all the Y people, and here's another group of these people. And I think a lot of organizations are moving away from that, but a lot of people don't know what other parts of the business do intimately, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, looking at the customer journey and all of the different teams that participate in that customer journey, because there's really few employees that are not going to care about the customer, right? And I would even argue if they don't care about the customer, then should they be working for the business?
Yeah. We'll call those people that should be working for our competitors.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's probably filter one is, do these people care about the customer? A, and if they do, tick, great, they have a job. And then B, harnessing their passion for the customer. And then helping them understand, well, you may not be aware, but these are all the hoops that the customer has to go through to engage with our business for various things, right?
Yeah.
And helping employees understand what that experience is like. Because as I said, most people want to do a great job. Most people want to, contribute meaningfully to their organization, assuming that they, again, care about the organization, they care about their customer, but they don't understand how they connect in to that customer experience.
Right.
And I'm imagining like something visual, right? I think job descriptions are many times unhelpful because it's just a whole conglomeration of words. But if people were given like a infogram that said, this is the role that you're going to play in delivering what we do for our customers.
Yes.
Right? That would fundamentally change how they step into that role and how they embody that role and how they deliver that work.
That's one of the beauties and at least from my perspective, one of the most powerful tools that I'll just say an operations function can do to really understand how the business works, and to your point, what role each person plays, so they can really make it visual. Is using a service blueprint or something similar to that actually maps it out, right, and creates that visual or that visualization of here's all the things that have to be in place in order for that ultimate customer experience to be realized. And by the way, you can look on this thing and look for the purple ones because that's you. And if you can pair that up with here's the visualization. So I have a theoretical understanding of it on paper, and then potentially, and where possible, you pair that up with the practical experience of, right? If you're in retail, you get the office people into the store, right? If you're in an organization that has a sales team, you send people out into the field with the people who generate business so they can see what it's like. And I think if you can, I'd love to hear your thoughts if you agree, but that combination of things to make it tactile, real, I can feel it, is so much better when they do come back to the office and they go behind the curtain. They've got this real understanding of what it's like out there on the front lines, facing a customer and trying to drive this growth that we're talking about.
100%. And I'm nodding my head because I have a story to tell about that. So,
I love it.
My last role in the US was for an online toy company, and I was a product manager for the party store, which I'm sure sounds like a completely out of me social, being the product manager for the party store. No. And all of the employees, there were hundreds of employees in this company, had to, over Christmas, the craziest time of the year, handle customer service calls.
Oh.
And can I tell you, it was challenging, but it was the best education we all had around the customer experience because we heard it. We heard it. We learned about our customer, who they were. We learned how they were using our product. We learned what their key challenges were.
Right.
And from that, there was a lot of directly applicable changes that we could make in how we delivered the service, how we marketed to them, how we positioned the product on the site. And it harnessed emotion. And I can't express enough the importance of harnessing emotion in your employees to deliver a great service,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that's a great point.
And service models and commercialization are intrinsically linked, right? And often revenue growth and commercialization growth opportunities come off the back of innovation around service models. So if you're really tuned in to your customer and you're exposing your employees to your customer, they're inevitably going to come up with ideas about how to improve that existing service model and therefore commercialization opportunities off the back of it, as well as new for service models you may not have even thought of.
Are there tips on how people whose role and livelihoods are sort of driven around, they're brought into organizations to help them grow. They're brought in to help people commercialize what they do and take things to the next step. Once you get beyond the, okay, we're doing pretty good. We're moving on this whole fix what we do thing. So we got this down a little bit. Maybe we might be a little bit into it. How do you then start to open their minds up beyond that to the next big thing? How do you encourage them to go a bit crazy and say, you know what, it's okay to try a couple of things that fail, to think a bit nuts, even though people have told you a million times it'll never work. How do you get them to go to that next step?
I think this is where bringing in some of the broader consumer trends is really important. So,
okay,
getting your organization to think about, so this is the problem that we're solving today, right?
Yeah.
What do we think how do we think this problem is going to evolve over the next few years? These are the trends that are going to shape, and I'll use banking as an example, right? We all knew that ATMs were going to go, right?
Yeah.
Many of us stopped carrying cash. We started using digital payment methods more often. And so the writing was on the wall a long time before ATMs actually went out, right? And so if I was a bank back then, I would be sitting down thinking about, okay, my customers are paying for things primarily digital. My customer is core, 25 to 54, and they're primarily paying for things digitally. They are traveling more often. Do you know what I mean? And so I would start to layer those trends happening outside of my industry that are shaping my industry and how my customer engages with my product, and then try to paint a picture of what that's going to look like in 5 years' time.
Most times that I've been involved in big things like that, you get up to a certain point, you get all these smart people in a room, and they've got all these great ideas and the things that you could explore.
Yeah.
And then crickets. So I'll just put it this way. Why are the leadership of companies so bad at taking what you just described about looking into the trends and looking to the future and starting to address those in some creative way? Why are they so afraid to take that next step?
Because I think they're trying to boil the ocean. There's enough examples of things that are there, these type of trends don't drop out of the sky. They're trialed and explored for years, in some cases decades. Quantum will be explored for decades before it's fully embedded into our lives, right? So we need to just take one of those, put a pin in the future, and as I said, fully inhabit what that moment looks like as a consumer and how that's going to impact your product or service.
So I'd love to think and talk a little bit about what exciting things do you have coming up? What are you going to be focusing on in the near future that's got you excited?
Yeah, well, at the moment, I'm working with one of the future growth centers in New South Wales, future growth councils in New South Wales. So thinking about what is our world, what's our state going to look like in the next 5, 10, 15 years? It's going to be fundamentally different. It's going to be a lot more people. There's going to be more than one CBD. doing more than
Yeah.
one airport. And so, yeah, working with local council who's going to be impacted by those changes and helping them think about what is that? What are we trying to be? What's our aspiration 10 years time? And how do we build from where we are now to that? And again, so it's really harnessing a lot of the things that we've talked about on this call, but with a lot more visibility and exposure. You know, you're talking about shaping a community,
Yeah.
shaping people's lives, shaping their livelihoods, shaping what their day-to-day working and home life looks like. So sort of higher stakes, but also hopefully better impact and better return.
All right, look, we're just about out of time, Mimi. I really appreciate your time. If you want to get in contact with Mimi, a link to Novari Consulting will be in the show notes. So everybody can check that out there. But thanks so much, Mimi, for being this week's Ops Innovator. It was really great speaking with you.
Thanks, mate. As always, so good to chat. Thanks for having me on.
Ops Innovator is produced in Sydney, Australia by 10% Labs. Our purpose is to engage thought leaders from all backgrounds, industries, and professions to explore what it takes to be truly innovative in how people and organizations work. From operating models and organizational structures, through policy and process to ways of thinking and working, it's about doing things differently and bringing the future forward to make things better now. The opinions shared by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily represent those of any organizations with whom they may be associated. If you would like to join the conversation as a future guest, or if you'd like to spotlight your startup that is focused on improving how organizations work, visit us at 10percentlabs.com. Until next time, this is Scott Williams encouraging you to keep looking for ways to do things differently so you can do them better.